Hello, everyone. Welcome to Maddox AI Plus Post Sales Summit. You are watching Create Personalized Engagement Plans for Every Account. I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Dan Ennis, Senior Director of Customer Success at Workato. As I introduce Dan, I'm going to go ahead and have them answer our icebreaker question. Dan, what's one AI use case you wish existed but you haven't seen yet?
Yeah, one that really comes to my mind, and maybe this is just because of my position in a more horizontal SaaS solution space for the last several years. I'd love something that really builds a tailored retroactive ROI case for the real world value and what customers are getting out of a platform, especially for when you're working at a software that doesn't necessarily one-to-one equate to one immediate use case, and goes beyond just kind of surface level metrics to real meaningful business value attained. So something that could help do that at scale retroactively beyond just the good work that we expect CSMs to be doing would be incredible, I think.
Good answer. I like that. Thank you, Dan, and I will hand it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to start in. There's a couple slides I'll run through. It won't be too many on the slides. So I want to make sure we spend most of our time looking at an actual live demo. Again, just thank you everybody for joining. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Dan Ennis. I'm a Senior Director of Customer Success at Workato. I've spent, the last 8 years plus of my career, really focusing on how do we scale our customer success impact, not just looking at it through the lens of a traditional scale customer success motion, though that had been a number of years there, but even in more kind of traditional higher touch CSM functions. How do we actually scale out the impact and make sure that we are bringing consistency? So that's really where I want to focus on today, and want to spend some time setting up with a couple slides, just walking through my approach to creating personalized engagement plans at scale, then walking through most of our time on a demo. So on that note, let's jump in. Um, Want to talk a little bit about the problem first that a lot of customers face, that a lot of ourselves like that we face as CSM practitioners, and that's really the fact that we try to say that we scale, but ultimately most accounts, when we're really honest and we're trying to solve the scale problem, get very surface level changes and very surface level personalization. The problem is we fall into the copy and paste trap where you've got CSMs on your team that all have, 60 plus accounts, maybe. You've got not enough headcount to do what you think you want to do. And so you say you want to scale that out. And in practice, what that usually means is you build a few key templates, whether that's email, slides, whatever that is. You just change the name, you change the logo, you plug and play some specific data, and you call that your strategy to scale and build something out. The reality, customers are getting the same plan. They're getting the same engagement. And then your teams spend a ton of time, if they are going to truly personalize, they spend hours every week combing your systems, pulling data, rather than actually working the strategy that they should be doing with their customers. And then lastly, this leads to missing key risks. Your team will spend their time on noisy accounts, missing key signals, missing key data, and really ignoring the risk that's coming from the larger accounts that are coming and seeing real risk in place. And the way I would focus on this in particular is a lot of teams focus on how do they use AI for efficiency. This is going to be a lot more focused on using it for effectiveness. How do you create more effective plays for your teams that are truly tailored to what the customers actually need? So thinking about it the old way, your teams will go in, they'll pull all the data manually, they'll open Gong, they'll comb through all their Gainsight health scores. They'll look and try to synthesize everything that they've got, and they'll take a template and then they'll create a new plan and hope that they're actually doing the right thing for the account because they don't have a whole lot of context. The reality is, with the tools that we have available, and I'm going to walk you through a version that ultimately doesn't require anything more than just a Claude Pro subscription. Doesn't require any bespoke separate tools that can plug right into your own systems, that will allow you to pull structured account data already, get a consistent project that allows your teams to be able to regularly produce plays that bring in true personalization, synthesizing signals, letting it act as a true strategist partner, something that gets a first draft to 80% of the way there, and then the team being able to apply their still very real strategic judgment and acumen to be able to bring in genuine account-specific plans at scale that can be repeatable across the whole portfolio. So that's the goal here. Again, not just saving time, but actually creating effective plays. Because the problem with the old way isn't the amount of time it takes necessarily. It's the fact that it makes your CSMs less effective results. So today, I'll share a little bit of the project template. Then I'll also walk through a little bit of how do you actually build this project? How do you actually come up with it? Because honestly, like more than just the project itself and how you're using it to create engagement plays at scale, what I want to do is actually share with you kind of the underlying framework of how I approach building projects, how I approach building new use cases. Because for some of you on the call today, some of you might be more advanced. This might feel more basic, but for others of you, you're still figuring out where do I even get started. And I want to actually show you a little bit of like how I use Claude, even to create the playbook I'm going to use for this demo, how I use Claude to actually create something that allows me to tailor it and got that feedback in real time, because I think it's something that can really unlock a lot of what you do. Then I'll walk through a little bit of how we brought in account data, kind of using a mock data from a spreadsheet that would be connected to real data in your production environment. And then lastly, I'll run the prompt across a few different accounts, show you a couple of different ways that we can highlight this. So without further ado, jumping straight into the live demo here. So recreated this, honestly, and it's something that is easy enough to create that I was able to do this even in my own kind of personal Claude. That way it is, not connected to any real data at the moment. But with a live environment, you'd be able to connect this straight to your own real actual data directly into your Salesforce, Gong, Gainsight, whatever systems you're using. So that way you can pull that in. So the first thing here, I was able to create like a spreadsheet that we use just for this demo. It's got all the account data in there. But pulling up the project itself, just want to walk through. The goal here was to create something that a CSM could easily go in and be able to understand, hey, what should I be doing for this account? And get really concrete guidance that reflects our specific POV on what a CSM should be doing, our priorities, so that we make sure that they're engaging the account the right way and getting a real template of how they can actually tailor their engagement, or that they can look across their whole book. So for the actual project prompt, walk through here, kind of again, some of the guidance here. I'll dive more in depth into this, but gave it the identity of a seasoned strategic CSM. It's got the primary mandates of focusing on NRR, retention, cross-sell, expansion, the account portfolio, pointing it here, telling it very structured. This is key when building something like this out, structuring it to tell it exactly how to find it and see the data there. So in this case, I pointed it to the spreadsheet. In a real session, this would actually point to a production environment. It would point to your real actual systems and connect there. I set it up to pull for, in this case, it'll pull examples because these are mock customers, but pulling in even an external news intelligence component. So that way, this project that we use live in our real environment actually does pull in live news headlines from our customers to make sure that it's incorporating not just the data we have, but what's really going on in the broader context that our customers are in. You can see it's got some of the information here about the customers with the mock data that we put there. And importantly here, we tell it on what to do with the signals. We give it the underlying playbook here, because what's really meaningful is if you develop your strategy, your POV, what your teams need to be focusing on, what your playbooks look like, that will allow you to feed that into Claude, ChatGPT, whatever LLM you're using, to get the instructions and train it to be able to create this tailored playbook generator that creates those customized plays at scale. I give it our criteria for how we think about account tiers, thinking across the board, what to do with different signals, and everything from there, right? So there's a lot that goes into everything in the core underlying project instructions here. And most importantly here that I wanted to highlight before you'll be able to see it in action in the actual project is we actually have it do a couple things. First, it reads the data. It understands where the account is, but then it switches into a consultative mode where it actually asks the CSM a couple questions about the account to make sure that it's got all the context, even if it's plugged into your systems, because there might be data that it doesn't fully get. So then continuing to go on through, after it does that, it'll generate a specific component where after it validates the questions here and gets the CSM's perspective, it will continue to go on, and after it validates the output, it will give them an email template, a call talk track, how to approach it, and what the engagement plan looks like, and as well as the recommended play, and it goes from there. So This is all the underlying kind of piping that goes into this project to help make sure that this is something that's repeatable. We're not needing to give our CSMs prompts that they need to keep reusing. We've built something that they can use. So jumping right on in, the first way that a CSM could use this would be if they were going across and they just want to understand what play should they be running for a specific account. So in this case, I'm going to want to know what play should I run for Acme Corp. And in real time, it's going to pull in, it's going to look and analyze the account data. It's going to start, in this case, reading the Excel file that we've got with all of the data there. In a real environment, this will be connected to your real systems, reading all of that data. It's giving me the full picture here, and it's giving me, it starts with a summary and a strategic read, including all the context of what it sees is going on with the health score, the actual meetings, the color of what's going on, and then it will continue to share on examples here, pulling in information from the QBRs that we've had, pulling on information from the actual meetings that we've had with this customer. It gives me an overall risk level. And from there, it's then able to take a recommendation on what we should be doing. And it highlights here that what it wants to do is target an expansion play, and really using one of the modules for the company that this is operating from, and getting a warm champion introduction path, getting a cross-sell motion going here. It walks through all of that. But what's really powerful about something like this to bring your CSMs into really the full strategic acumen and bringing in their specific perspective and your organization's concrete point of view, really, it's these questions here. So for example, it mentions here, like it looks at in the data and it sees here that on January 6th, it asks me a few questions here. So it can see that Tom asked for a demo there, and I can say that, you know what, the demo actually happened and Tom loved it. And then when they're asking what 2 manufacturing lines means operationally for them, I'm going to, in this case, say, I'm honestly not sure. I can find out later. And then lastly, I can say, yes, we resolved the open API access request that they had. So again, you're not just creating something that is creating something templated out of the box that doesn't bring in your concrete point of view. It's actually still bringing in your team's strategic perspective. And then even there, it's reading that it makes sure that, hey, I'm picking up that there's expansion signals here. Is there an AE looped in? Do they need to be brought into this? And I'll just say in this case, they're fully looped in and engaged. And from there, it'll take all of that context that I've shared, and it's going to build out kind of what the actual play is. And it's going to go as far as taking that a step further and highlighting based on not just what it's going to recommend I do, it's going to actually go and give me either an email template or a call talk track on how to approach it. Wasn't even sure which one it was going to do. And the beauty of something like this is as your team does it, you could even at a later time come back and re-engage with what you've done by engaging in the project directly and saying, hey, I actually took this action. What should I do next? And it'll provide that POV for you. And I love it. You'll see here it's pulling in some of that external announcement from the external news sources, highlighting that, hey, we know that this company has gone through a Series C recently, bringing that in, using that even as part of our engagement strategy. And you could come back and do this. And this is what that would look like with a healthy account. And then just to give one more account specific example, let's just use it with our account Globex. And you can see again, it runs this. It's a very similar motion. I'm going to spend less time kind of highlighting all the specifics here, but just so you can see the very different approaches of what this brings to bear for you. And it really takes into context the fact that this is going to be, spoiler, this is a significantly more unhealthy account, a little more neutral, and it's going to provide all the context on how we should engage, more information with questions. How do we actually follow up? It's not going to recommend that we do an expansion play, for example. They want us to re-engage, going the executive path, all of those components here. So one thing that this project allows is it allows you to tailor that at an individual account level if you're trying to go in and get the feedback about what do I do for this specific account? How do I actually engage with this customer? I'm not sure. I've got too many accounts. I'm not really positive where to begin right now based on what's going on. But the other beautiful thing about a strategy like this is they can go in and they can also approach it the other way for our teams. They might want to know, hey, I'm not sure which accounts I should actually focus on from a risk mitigation or excuse me, from a cross-sell perspective. And so if they just wanted to know which accounts should I run a cross-sell play for, what it'll do is instead of just going deep on one account, it's going to go across the book and provide through that conversational layer for the teams that kind of guidance. And there are other maybe full bespoke tools that do certain things like this, but at just a conversational level, we've found that giving our teams access to projects like this in real time allows them to engage significantly more than with having to go into another tool that they have to learn the interface to find the accounts that are flagged for cross sell versus something conversational where they can truly just ask because we've trained it, because we've given it our specific POV on how we want the CSMs to run their book of business. And so you can see here, it goes through and it's analyzing and it's recommending it only for one of them. And for one, it's saying slow, and the other one it's saying is totally off the table. And what I love about this is it then even transitions into actioning on that particular account. I can say, yes, let's proceed with Acme. And from there, what it's going to do is it's going to go straight up into what the mode of what it was doing, excuse me, for the other chat thread. When I went in and was going into Acme, and now you can see that here, and you can follow up on that. And the final bit that I'll share here as just one last example, we'll leave out while this is going on here. Just to go back and show how a CSM could come back to these down the line. Let's go back into our conversation with here, and I'll say I emailed Tom, had a great meeting with him and Priya. What should I do next? So it doesn't become just a one-time tailored plan. It becomes like an ongoing strategy consultant for your CSMs and is able to make sure that it's providing them guidance that is that kind of coaching on an ongoing basis that allows them to provide something that is truly tailored to what's going on in the account, what's really going on that they need to be aware of. And so that way they can make sure that they are actually providing that manager level strategic guidance with every account they're operating with at scale and not needing to operate off of templates, not needing to operate off of just customizing it. And you could make a project like this even more powerful and connect it to, for example, Google Slides and have it generate the slide deck that you wanted to create. You could follow through and have it create whatever other resources you wanted to create as an output from this, something that's customer facing, leave it as internal, connect it up to your Gmail, have it actually send the email. There's a number of ways you could have it engage like this that I think is very meaningful to how it would be able to, excuse me, actually include, it would be able to include all of that data and make sure that it's providing really truly tailored recommendations for the customer. So that's this particular project, but honestly, even just taking a step back, for some of you, maybe you aren't even sure where to begin to build something like this. So I just kind of wanted to walk you through even super simply, like how I put it together for this project, just because I think having the framework of how do you begin, what's your starting point look like when you want to build something like this? So going over here, honestly, like this seems like, again, for some of you might be the most basic thing, but using Claude to help you build in Claude or using ChatGPT to help you build in ChatGPT. So for example, if I'm sharing in here that I want to create something that assumes the role of a strategic CSM with extreme amounts of experience, and I've got my POV in a playbook already. You've got your documentation in different systems. You already have maybe your sharpened perspective on what exactly your CSMs should be doing, but you don't know how to operationalize that at scale. I just tell it, this is what I want to do. I upload the data I need. It's asking me some of the questions. And then it'll go through and it gives some recommendations on it. And it provides a lot of that information through a project. But really a lot of the value comes in testing it is like, hey, I actually want it to do more things. I actually want this case to pull in external news signals. And then therefore it's going in and it's updating. You're testing, you're going back and forth with Claude. You're going back and forth saying, this isn't actually producing what I want it to. What do I need to do? I'm asking it questions. Hey, do I also need to upload these into the actual project? Just going back and forth. Honestly, like engage it as a dialogue partner, bring it in to actually help fully make sure that you're getting what you need out of it. And I honestly like the amount of folks that I've spoken to that feel like they need to already know where to start, as opposed to being able to go in and say, hey, I'm actually not sure where to start. What should I do? Or I've tried building something and I'm getting something wrong. Why am I getting the wrong thing out of it? Um, this sounds maybe silly, but like honestly, treating Claude, treating ChatGPT, treating whatever LLM you're using for these plays as an actual kind of thought partner, like you would, like a team member, when a team member would be bringing you results and you don't quite get how they got to where they got, and you ask it, like, hey, why'd you do this? They're really good for answering that. They're really good for helping clarify that. So I wanted to just do the kind of under the hood a little bit here, less so for this particular project and more so that you can understand a little bit of what it looks like to go through and build whatever it is that you need there. On that note, I'm going to jump back in. I only have one or two more slides because I have one or two things I want to call out, wrapping up the demo here, but let me quickly see here if there's anything in the Q&A. I'm going to pause really quick. I see a question from Nick about what's included in the spreadsheet that's uploaded. Excuse me. Yeah, that's exactly it. I included things like what's the customer? Do we have exec sponsorship? What's their health score? What's gone on in some of the most recent meetings? Think the things that you would naturally be pulling from your CRM through your product utilization data from places like Snowflake. Think what you'd be pulling from Gong, that kind of texture. I just mocked that up into the spreadsheet to include because in a real environment, it would be pulling directly from your systems. Amazing. So jumping back in, a couple of things I wanted to highlight about, excuse me, the project prompt in particular. Number one, giving it a really clear role. When you do that, it anchors it. It anchors it in specific expertise, and you want to make sure you're getting very concrete perspective, not something that's a generic output. The second bit here, and this is something I alluded to when I was talking about the data sources and how it connects, every variable you want to map to a real data source. You don't want it to just give you free text summaries, which CSMs or whoever's using it don't know what it's going to give them. You want them to have consistency. And so what you want to do is be able to structure that. And if you're not sure how, again, use Claude to help you say, how should I map this data into this project to make sure that I get a consistent output from my team? And on the specific output, giving it the defined output you want it to do. Like that's something that you need to include in when you're creating these. You don't want to just say, give me an engagement play. You want to give it something specific. So something like in this case, we gave it really clear on, we want the situation summary. We want to know what are the top three priorities. Should we go on a cross-seller expansion motion? What kind of cadence should we take? And then what's the renewal risk? And then lastly, one of the most overlooked kind of aspects when you're creating a prompt or when you're creating a project is giving it a constraint around the tone. We highlighted there at the end, telling it to be direct. We didn't want CSM platitudes in there. We even were very clear that the result should be action, not platitudinal. When you take that into account, it's one of the things that will help remove some of the generic quote unquote AI sounding output in what your team gets so that they can make sure that they're getting something that's concrete and matches the tone of what you're going for and that's genuinely helpful. Lastly, just kind of going a step further, there are two ways you can kind of take this even further in your real production environment. Today's demo did manual data prep. We did do some of the copy paste. We did do a spreadsheet. But some of the things that you could really do is either connect it directly to the systems using some of the native connectors that are there in Claude or ChatGPT. They allow you to plug in directly into your enterprise systems to pull data. And then you can even go a step further with things like various MCPs, some of which are out of the box available through different vendors. Other ones you have to build. Either way, what those let you do is get real live data that you've got more modular control over when you're running these with your teams. It lets you take actual action. Like, so for example, at the end, this gave me an email template. If you've got this hooked up to your Gmail, either natively or through an MCP, it can actually go a step further and write the email on your behalf, send it out for your team, even removing the need to have the middleman of copy paste, things like that. And it really gives it the guardrails to make sure that it's operating within kind of your security and governance. So really just wanted to highlight something that I didn't actually get to do here in the actual template. But I think that would be beneficial to use here. Then lastly, excuse me, a couple things just to be aware of, some of the gotchas that can come into play here when you're running with a play like this. Number one, garbage in, garbage out, right? It's going to be reading your data. So if your data is completely inaccurate, you will get wildly inaccurate recommendations. So focus on cleaning that up. And again, you can even leverage AI to help you with that, finding things that are stale, finding things that haven't been updated in a long time. A workflow like this is going to expose all the gaps in your CRM, all the gaps in your data. The second bit there is reminding your teams when they're using something like this, they're used to putting something in and getting what they might think of as like a completely delivered project. Instead, coaching folks through using a project like this to get the first draft, in the sense that you still want your team to have their acumen. You want their perspective on the account. You want to make sure that you're bringing that in. So this will get it to that 80% point, and then you bring in that 20% judgment. You bring in that nuance, the relational context, all those things that's not going to be in necessarily any system. Lastly, the project and the prompt, it needs to be your voice. One of the things that I shared here was I mentioned that I had a document where I documented what are our CSM plays, what are our biggest priorities as a CSM org. Make sure that it includes that. And as you do so, treat it like a living document. It's not something that you do, you set and forget. Iterate on it, make updates over time based on feedback from your team. And then lastly, focus on automating and all the connections and everything second. Build the core project first, deal with a little bit of the manual bit first to get the team bought in and so you can tweak it and make sure that the output quality is what you need. Then work on automating things, then work on enhancing it. The key message there is you want to make sure that you don't let perfect become the enemy of good on that case. So in a nutshell, that's really what I wanted to share today. Let me see if there's any other questions. I don't see any that have come in yet, but of course, feel free to add your questions into the Q&A chat. Looking at the channel, I see someone mentioned not seeing the spreadsheet. I can share my screen on the spreadsheet that I used here for the project. Let me put that in. But ultimately, let me see. I'll have to re-download that in a minute here. But ultimately let me just go into where I created that in a second. But with the spreadsheet, it was truly just the mock data. But you think through whatever data you want to pull in. Account context, I can share that out after. But the data in there was just the mock data that we used around whatever signals you're looking for. So I can share that out by the end of this. I can share the example, David. I saw that in the chat. But the key here is whatever you use, you want to make sure that it's got the signals that are relevant to what you are actually looking for, that's going to be needed for your CSMs to action on those playbooks. Awesome. I'll take a second here if there's any other questions, and I've got 2 minutes left. All right, that's everything I had, Hisham. If you have anything
Awesome.
you want to share, let me stop my screen share.
All good. Thank you, Dan. And with that, we are at the end of our session. The recording of this session will be available tomorrow in our resource hub, and all Summit attendees will be notified when the resource hub is live. Thank you to our wonderful speaker, Dan, again, for joining us today. This was very informative. And thank you to everyone else for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.